Technology, artificial intelligence, and social media are just some of the big topics up for discussion at the World Economic Forum in Davos right now. President Trump is there to promote his America First policies. And in this age of hyper-connectivity, the struggle to stay on topic and present and free from distractions, it's a real struggle.
It is indeed. Derek Thompson is a senior editor at The Atlantic as well as the author of Hitmakers. Hitmakers is just like it sounds. It's all about what goes into making something a hit. In February, an expanded preface to the book comes out titled How to Succeed in the Age of Distraction. Author Derek Thompson joins us now on set. Welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
Good to see you. So this is a really fascinating book.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie had been raving about it for quite some time, and I'm so happy that you're able to come on and talk to us about it. First of all, explain the update to the book.
Sure. A lot's happened in the last year. I don't know if you were aware. It was interesting because the book came out, the book was basically finished in October 2016. We had an election in this country the very next month. And when it was published in February of 2017, the news cycle was basically all about Trump. So as I was going around the country talking about the book, talking about what makes a hit in music and movies, but also in other cultural industries, a lot of people were asking, does the book explain the election? Does the book explain the president? And it was interesting because in many ways, the ideas in the book are perfectly predictive of someone just like Trump. Maybe the most important idea in the book is that we live in a culture that has a myth of novelty. We tell ourselves that we like new things. We like new music. We like new movies, new clothes. But in fact, the most powerful bias in humanity might be a bias toward familiarity.
Right.
We love new products that remind us of old products. Sequels, adaptations, reboots in movies, Murphy Brown coming back in television. And what about politics? Well, here's Donald Trump, a celebrity, a new figure in politics, but an old figure in entertainment, essentially saying, let's take America back to 1957. So you had a new political face with the oldest possible political message, and this combination of novelty and familiarity, what I call in the book a familiar surprise, is exactly what seems to succeed across the cultural landscape.
So that's one argument in the book, that something that becomes popular is different, but not so different but familiar. And then the other part of the argument is that it's not necessarily the content, it's the distribution method. If you can get it out there to as many people as possible, you stand a greater chance of having something become popular. And I guess that applies to him as well. I mean,
100%.
Before he was a candidate, he was a pop culture icon. He was a reality show whiz. He was a businessman and an author, and the list goes on and on and on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, in the book, the book's theses are really twofold. First, the myth of novelty that I just discussed, and second, the myth of virality. I think we live in a culture now where we think that we use the term viral to explain anything that goes big and we don't have a better explanation. We just say, oh, that came out of nowhere. I'm sure it went viral. In epidemiology, virality means something very specific. It means it gets popular or it spreads through many, many generations of intimate sharing. But there's another way that information spreads in our culture, and that's broadcast technology. That's not one-to-one. It's 1 to 1 million at one moment. And if you look at what made Donald Trump so successful, particularly in the Republican primary, a lot of people, both Democrats and Republicans, say it wasn't just his Twitter feed, it wasn't just his persona, it was the earned media. It was the fact that news organizations could not stop covering him in order to get ratings, and so we got all of this free advertising. He piggybacked off of broadcasts that already existed.
Right.
And throughout the book, I talk about dating apps and so-called viral books like 50 Shades, and how they too essentially piggybacked off of broadcast. And so I think it's really important when trying to make something popular, whether you're out there, you're trying to make a song or an app, don't just think about the content. Think about the distribution strategy as well. Many times that is just as important as what you've made.
It's sort of counterintuitive because you want to think that original and high quality original is what's going to take you to the top. And it's not necessarily the case.
In fact, listening to you, Derek, and reading the book, I was taken by the fact that even so, when I was in ROTC in the military, one of the things we learned this is going to sound kind of off base, but it really does. The idea that if you were ever to be captured as prisoner of war, one of the things that the humans don't like is every day if your captors come in and change the system. What anybody can get to, any human being can get to the worst circumstances if it's regular. If every day this is the rock that you're pushing up that hill. Anytime you change that, it throws the mind off. Human beings do not take well to change that happens on a regular basis. So I just thought that was really interesting. Let's talk, forget Trump, because we do a lot of Trump, but let's talk about pop culture. That's my thing. You talk about what makes certain things popular. Star Wars. Everybody knows I love Star Wars. Star Wars. What about Star Wars did you learn through your research?
What's so interesting about the story of how Star Wars was written is that George Lucas's first scripts for Star Wars Episode 4, the first movie that came out, were absolute dreck. And everyone told him this. One of his best friends was Francis Ford Coppola, the director of The Godfather, among other movies. And he said, look, this is terrible. You've designed this beautiful, novel world, but there's no structure to take the audience through it. And so George Lucas ended up reading the work of Joseph Campbell, who came up with this theory of the hero's journey, that the greatest stories that mankind has ever told, going back to Buddha and Jesus, are the same story. It's the story of the outsider who enters a supernatural world, faces a series of challenges, ultimately faces down a nemesis who's intimately related to his own origin story, and then defeats him and comes back to the regular world as the hero. I mean, this is Harry Potter, it's obviously Luke Skywalker, it's even The Lord of the Rings. And once George Lucas discovered that he just needed to make his story the most basic story that's ever been told, Star Wars worked on both levels. It's both extremely familiar and extremely gratifying to see a story we recognize, but also so wondrous to see that familiar story in the most novel world-building exercise ever done in cinema. And in many ways, I think, even today, the true victory, the true triumph of Star Wars is not so much in the storytelling, even when the storytelling is good. It's in the incredible creativity of the world building by George Lucas. So, to your point, when you say, originality doesn't make it, it's true. Originality is not enough. You need that blend of true, brilliant originality and also familiar enough storytelling to make it click with audiences.
Here's the question that Anne-Marie and I have been debating over your book. Is there a formula to popularity? In other words, can I write a hit song if I use 1, 4, 5 chords that sound familiar to every single person and I just change it up? Every single song that came out in the 50s had essentially the same chord structure, just different words. Is that a hit? Is that all I need?
And I will point out that the title of the book has changed. The reprint does say how to succeed. Have you managed to figure out an equation like Light is suggesting?
I think it's important to understand that formulas work when the underlying variables don't change. So there's a formula for salt, because sodium and chloride are always sodium and chloride. The ingredients, however, for hits, familiarity, surprise, those change all the time. A song that comes out in 1955, like Rock Around the Clock, is going to sound really novel to 55-year-olds in that year, but really old to 17-year-olds in 2018. So it's important to realize what you're working with, what ingredients you're working with in familiarity and surprise. A formula for success, when it comes to becoming a CEO or designing a hit song, is never going to exist. And the reason why is that if enough people discover this formula, enough people read this book and other books like this, and use the same formula, then they can't be extraordinarily successful. All of the output of that formula is going to be the same. But hits are, by definition, extraordinarily successful. So there can't be a formula for extraordinary success like this. Rather, I think it's important to go through history, go through psychology, as I've done, understand what are the ingredients of human affinity and human liking that make us click, and then how do I overlay that on 2018, the same way the great hit makers of the past have done so, George Lucas in the 1970s, Rock Around the Clock in the 1950s.
But you can, and we have to wrap it up, but you can make it easier, I should say, to facilitate that, because you have the point of Sweden, how ABBA, the hits that ABBA wrote, they're so great, and people have studied what is so particular about Sweden that almost every pop group that comes out of Sweden has these great catchy lyrics. And you point out that the government and the country itself has a system by which they encourage that.
Yes, think of it this way: is there a formula for hitting a home run? Of course not. There could never be a formula for hitting a home run. That said, there's some great batting coaches and some great techniques that can increase your odds of hitting a home run by 50, 100 times. This is a home run book. It's not about the formula, the foolproof formula that does not exist and promising people something that's impossible. Rather, it's about making your swing better so that your chance of succeeding the next time you make something is improved dramatically.
It's very good. There are a lot of really interesting stories.
Yes.
It's too unfortunate to interrupt this. Billboard Top 100 and the rise of the popularity of hip-hop. When will the leisure suit become popular again? There's a great fashion timeline.
I think it's coming back.
It's coming back. There's so many great things in this book. I absolutely love it.
I have a leisure suit in my closet. just waiting for that moment, Derek. Just waiting for that moment to come back. Derek Thompson, thank you very much for stopping by.
Thank you, guys.